There's usually this expression that when something bad happens to us, it's as if life brings us to our knees. And so the thing about this expression is that when something bad happens to us, it's more like a judo throw where you're just tossing in the air. You don't know where up is and where down is. And so when you actually get to the point where your knees touch the ground, that's actually a good thing because you can actually feel the ground and build yourself up from that position. And so with this video, I just want to go through some of the things I try to keep in mind when something negative that I did not predict happened to me. And so one of the things that is very important when something bad happens to us is to, instead of trying to figure out immediately what to do, the best course of action is to feel first. So to really understand how you feel about the situation and feel the emotions that come from just what happened to you. So there's some sort of emotional processing that should take priority before you just start thinking about the situation. Because if you just start thinking when you have emotions that haven't been processed, the quality of insight that you will have from those thinking processes will probably not be ideal. Another essential part is, of course, understanding why that thing happened. And so there could be a multitude of reasons. Many times it's because we do something that we didn't prepare sufficiently to do. So we just went head on and we just didn't have the fundamentals or the prerequisites to actually do that thing. But the key element here is that when we are analyzing why this situation happened to us, we most likely will be able to come up with a lot of different narratives. And so it is very easy to just get fixated on getting to the why. But as I mentioned before in other videos, asking why is actually a very hard question because you can sort of build up an infinite regression of the whys. So my advice here is for you, of course, to analyze the situation and try to understand what were the driving factors that perhaps led to that situation, but not staying there for too long. And so if you have a lot of different reasons for why you might have failed or why that thing happened to you, normally from a pragmatic approach, pick the one reason which allows you to have more actionable insights. And so something else that people tend to say when they fail or when something bad happens is that they are flabbergasted about how that thing actually happened. And they tend to say, oh, I did everything right, or I tried everything. And so I believe that this idea is flawed. And let me just give you an example. Some people who are trying to lose weight and they're not being able to lose weight, they say, I'm doing everything right, I'm exercising, I'm eating well. And the problem with that statement is for each one of those claims, for example, I am exercising right. Exercise is an umbrella term for a very diverse range of activities. So you can be doing resistance training, you can be doing more about cardio and conditioning. And so when you say that I've tried everything, I've done exercise, when you say I've exercised, there's a lot of different things within the realm of exercise that you haven't tried. So just like in science, when we construct a new model, we always know that that model has a lot of different limitations. And we know that the objective of that model is to allow us to reach a certain insight with the least amount of assumptions. But we know that eventually we're going to create a better model. So we don't really get too much attached to that certain model. And so when we say I tried everything or I did everything right, we are essentially taking away our own ability to reach other insights. And so another thing that we should also consider is, and this is part of the Stoic technique of searching for silver linings, is to see our failures as an opportunity to rebuild and try different things out. And this is a cliche, but a lot of times actually when we are confronted with failure or with something else that deeply troubles us, that's going to put some pressure into our ability to grow and adapt. And sometimes when you have that pressure, we can actually do great things. The other part which we also need to be aware of is that when something bad happens and when we fail, we tend to create this fear of failure because we don't want this to repeat again. And so we try to make our world as small as possible in order to avoid repeating this experience again. And so what is very important is for you to understand that failure is just part of life, and that most of the times people who actually achieve success aren't necessarily the brightest or the strongest, but they're the ones who actually see failure as a natural part of the process. So they go through failure a lot of times, but they don't lose their ability to expose themselves. They just keep on trying. And this is part of the process. For example, with this YouTube channel, I'm creating more and more videos. And the more videos I create, the easier it comes for someone to watch my videos and say, oh, you said this wrong and this information is correct. And that's just part of the process. As the channel grows, you'll get more exposure. And with that exposure, you will most likely get more criticism, but that criticism should be taken in a constructive way and allow you to understand, okay, what ideas I have need more work. And so really just try to keep this mindset that failures are just another opportunity to learn. And so let's say that the particular failure that happened to you was you had a business idea and it didn't go well. When something bad happens to a certain idea or to the implementation of a certain process, we have this tendency to throw it all in the garbage. To say, okay, since this failed, every element that went into the production of this idea is crappy. And so that's also problematic, because just because something failed, it doesn't mean that all of the elements that were present were actually the causes of that failure. There are a lot of possible mitigating factors. And so this can also be true in the opposite case, which is also harmful, which is you achieve success at doing something. And so because you have achieved success, you create this fallacy where, since that method actually worked, you believe that that is the best method possible, or that the way you achieved success was actually the only way to achieve success. And so you essentially eliminate the idea that you might have reached the same success by doing something else, and that something else could have actually generated more success than your own method. So it also works both ways, and so we shouldn't get too dogmatic with our assumptions of what went well and what went wrong. And so these days it's also becoming more of a practice for people to do mindfulness and yoga and other types of things. But at least for me, I also feel that something which is very helpful is to create a thinking time. So for example, deliberately scheduling, for instance, 10 minutes a day for just thinking. And you can write down your thoughts, you can just really try to create a time where you're very intentional about thinking. And so you're not engaging in rumination. You've actually decided that during those 10 minutes, you're going to deeply think about some of the issues or problems that might be going on with your life. And so I think that's something that you should try out. And for me, at least, sometimes new insights arise when I'm very deliberate with the way I think. Something that might also help is, instead of describing our life as a book with many chapters, maybe it's best to see it as a continuous flow of events. And the reason for not discretizing life and creating all of these chapters, and why it might be helpful, is that when you create a chapter based on a certain event, you're putting a lot of importance on a success or a failure, and and the tendency when we create chapters is to just focus on a particular element that went on through that chapter. And so if you see things in a continuous flow, you don't get as much attached to the outcome. And a lot of times we produce our best work when we are not outcome oriented and when we actually follow our passion. And this is an advice that Rubin often gives, and I truly feel that is amazing, which is to not be so worried about how other people are going to perceive your work, and to just produce the work that you believe is the best for you. And so normally that could be the best path to success, because when we get too captured, or there's this term of audience capture, where we try to do things that we believe other people will like, we sort of lose that thing which makes our work special. So overall, these are some tips that I believe could be helpful if you're struggling or if you're going through a particular moment in your life. And so let me know if you found this helpful, and if you have something that you would like me to discuss in future videos. Thank you.